Good morning, Tuckasegee. Man, I'm telling you, I've been here for a while, I guess 5+ years now, and I just still love this place, right? I mean, the longer I stay here, the more I just love it and love it and love it. And the way you guys treat my family, everybody who's in my life group, man, you guys you make my life better. You know, I mean, really, I just want to thank you guys for being my church family. I love it. It's an exciting and wonderful thing that I get to stand up here and share the Word of God with you today. But I tell you, like me and Chris, we get really nervous when we preach because we don't do it quite as often as Jason. We're a little out of practice, I guess. And Chris and I were talking the other day. He said, you're going to preach coming up, you know? I said, yeah. And he said, you preached a week after me. What are you preaching on? I said, service. He's like, well, me too. And I'm like, well, we can't preach service 2 Sundays in a row. And then so Chris says, well, I'm preaching first, so... And I'm like, well, I picked my passage first, so, you know, and then, and so I said, okay, well, fine, Chris, we didn't really say that, but, but we were thinking it. But I said, okay, Chris, I'm going to think about maybe changing mine up a little bit. So I go in the Bible and I start saying, you know, God, I want you to lead me to a passage that's not about service, so I can preach something different than what Chris preached. And so it's the New Testament, so I'm sticking with Jesus stories, you know, and I'm going through all these Jesus stories, and I'm get to a point where I've looked over like several of them, and I'm like, okay, feeding the 5,000, blind man healed, lame man made to walk. I keep going through this list, and after a while, I'm like, they're all about service. Like, I cannot even preach a story about Jesus where he's not serving. Because when you follow Jesus around the New Testament, he's just serving all the time. And it was such I felt like a dummy, to be honest. You know, I have a master's degree, if you didn't know that. And I'm like surprised by this. Why am I surprised? That everywhere I see Jesus, I see service. So it's sort of like one of those things that I was just like, man, I should have seen this earlier, right? And certainly, I would say about Chris, you know, I'm sorry, man, but I got to go with service. But I want to tell you a story about really, I guess the first time I got saved when I was 16 years old. I was out washing a car. It's kind of this girl was hitting on me. And we were talking about, I was working with, and we were talking about how, you know, what we liked in the person we wanted to date. You know, we were kind of basically describing each other, just flirting pretty much. So she at one point, and she wasn't this good Christian girl. I don't know why she said this, but she said, Matt, I really want a guy who loves the Lord. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's good. And so I'm out washing this car at the car wash, and I'm working a few minutes later, and I'm like, that's not me. Everything else she said was me, but that's not me. And so, needless to say, that girl didn't work out. But I got that moment. I'm sitting here washing a car, and I look up, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I'm not a Christian. I've been in church all my life. I've gone to Christian school, chapel 2 times a week. I mean, I am Christianized, but I am not a Christian. And I didn't follow Christ. I got saved. Well, I'm 16 years old. I'm going to church. My church did this thing called camp meeting. It's kind of old school. Basically, we invite like 80 pastors in, and we feed them and everything and take care of them for the week. And so my parents were like in charge of everything. My dad ran the sound. My mom fed everybody. And so I'm just there all week hanging out at this camp meeting. 16 years old, just got saved. And all these pastors would come, and a few missionaries would come and stuff like that. Well, there was this little Filipino missionary that came. And I say little, I mean, he was like this tall. Really, really nice guy named Robert Monamis. And so nobody was talking to Robert, and we would go down. They had dinner every night. So I went down to the dinner, you know, and I was sitting across, and I'm like, this guy's not got anybody to talk to. He doesn't really know anybody. So I sat down and started talking to him. I found out he's a Filipino missionary. I found out later that there's like a church in Ohio that will fly them over here, give them a car and like $100 and tell them, you know, pray your way back to the Philippines pretty much. And they go and they try to raise money to go plant churches in the Philippines. And this guy had done this. I mean, just a pure act of faith. And so I'm sitting here talking to him about all his missions in the Philippines and everything and like what he's trying to do. And he wasn't like telling me a sob story. I mean, this is just kind of like, he's like, you know, I came here because my friend told me there'd be a bunch of pastors here. And I want to go talk to these pastors, see if I can get them to support me to go back to the Philippines and do mission work. And so I said, well, that's great, man. Let me introduce you to some pastors. Throughout the week, I'm introduced to them. I found out I didn't have a place to stay, so I got an extra room and somebody had in our church to let him stay there for the week. And I just every day am eating lunch and dinner with this guy. Every day, lunch and dinner. So I just got to know Robert really good throughout the week. And my heart just kind of went out to him. And there was one night, I'm 16 years old. I've been working with my grandpa laying carpet. And don't ever ask me to help lay carpet. I still don't know anything about it. But I was working with my grandpa laying carpet, did it like my whole childhood. And so I'm over here laying carpet, and I made like $4 an hour or some junk like that. And I got finally a $200 built up that I had saved. And my grandpa like got a payday or something, so he just paid me $200 cash. So I'm 16 years old, I got $200 cash in my pocket. I go to the last night of this camp meeting, and they're doing this like invitation hymn or whatever, like at the end. And I look down at Robert, and I just think, this guy needs this money worse than I do. So I opened up, I didn't give him all of it, I gave him $100, 5 20s, because I'm greedy, I'm sorry. And I opened up the front cover of his Bible, he's sitting in front of me singing, opened the front cover of his Bible, and I slide in 5 20s. And so this night, I thought there's no way, honestly, I wanted to avoid, I wasn't like trying to be super holy there. I wanted to avoid the awkward conversation where it's like, oh, you're so generous. No, stop. I didn't want to do that. So I was just like, here, I'm just going to slide it in. Nobody will know anything different. He'll just find it and be like, thank God. So that night, 12 o'clock at night, I get a phone call at my house. And I'd given Robert my number. I said, if you need anything, just give me a call. I get a phone call at my house. And he's like in tears, just bawling, sobbing. And he's like, you know what, man? I'm sitting here, and I got $6 in my pocket. I got a car with like $10 worth of gas in it, and that's it. And after tomorrow, I don't have a place to stay. And he said, and I just sit down, and I just open up I sit down and I pray, and I was like, God, I need you to just come through right now. I'm just coming through on faith here. I just need you to provide for me. He said, I open up my Bible, and there's $100 in my Bible. And then he's just crying and crying and crying, and I'm like, man, that's amazing. And and he's like, you did it, didn't you? And I said, well, okay. And so the awkward conversation, here we go. So, but I remember that as a 16-year-old kid, I just got saved. I'm trying to learn in this moment to be sacrificial, to serve. And I remember just struggling with that, right? Like seriously, as I sat there, the whole service, I sat there thinking about what I was going to do with this money. And when you're a kid and you work like hard labor for $200 at $4 an hour, it's a lot of hours. And it's like it's hard to even give that up. But I remember struggling with that. And what it came down to, guys, was why I was going to serve Robert. Why I was going to serve Robert. This is what I really want to talk to you today is about why I serve. So I want to pick up where Chris left off. Chris said, you should serve. All right, you should serve. He gave you a good example in the Good Samaritan. He gave you some needs that we have here at our church, very practical needs. I want to pick up where he left off, and I want to talk about the why. And guys, this is really important because every one of you is essential to what we're doing here at this church. I could probably speak for all the pastors pretty easily and say that we're not worried about building and grounds issues. We're not worried about how much parking there is. We're not worried about how much money comes in. Those are not our primary worries. Our primary worries is how many volunteers do we have? That's the primary worry. Because we know that if we're going to move forward as a church, that the most important thing we can do is to get volunteers on board. And every time that I come and talk to a volunteer about something, this is what I think is actually going on in their mind. They're asking the question, why should I serve? Right? And it's a reasonable question. It's not because they're being a jerk. It's a reasonable question. Because what do you have? When I say, hey, I want you to come serve on Tuesday night at 6, you're like, check my calendar. Right? You got stuff. You got a priority list. And I'm saying, take this new thing and stick it in that priority list. And you're like, why? That's just reasonable, right? It's not bad. But I would start off by saying this. You may not know why you serve, but you know that he did it for you. So let's go ahead and read. If you have your Bibles, turn to John 13. And we're going to start in verse 2. John 13, verse 2. So the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already come and prompted Judas, the son of Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into the basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, and drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, you are going to wash my feet? And Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you're going to understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Well then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. And Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said, not everyone was clean. Speaking of Judas. Verse 12, and when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Right? You may not know why you serve, but you know what he did for you. You may not know why you serve, but you know what he did for you. So think about these disciples here. They're getting their feet washed by Jesus. And Peter's a little thrown off by this. Right? We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. He's still thrown off by this. Like, come on, Jesus. I'm supposed to wash your feet. Right? And it's like, well, you may not always know why you serve. And this is the why I'm bringing this up, because the why for you serving might be a question mark. What do you do for that? If I say, why should you serve? And you're like, I don't fully understand. Like I don't know exactly how I'm going to help the teens. I don't know exactly how I'm going to benefit the children's ministry. You know, I don't know how I'm going to do this and that. That why might be a question mark for you, right? But while it is, this is what Jesus said to him. He said, do you understand what I've done for you? Do you understand what I've done for you? And here's the truth. No, they had no idea what he'd done for them. They didn't understand it, because here's what Jesus was actually doing. It says when he's finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. He was in an undergarment. Okay, and servants wore undergarments and a towel around their waist. Rich people wore undergarments, and they wore an outer garment on top. Right? So if you weren't a slave, you would have had an outer garment on. But Jesus took off his outer garment, came down from that position, put on what the slave would have wore, and went to serve. Do you understand? He didn't understand, but guys, here's the thing. If you and I can come to really understand what it is that Jesus has done to us, the immensity with which we have been served. You know, I was reading J. Vernon McGee, and he's old school. He's been dead for a while now, actually, but used to run a Through the Bible series, and they have a book that's the whole series, him talking through it. And he said, I wish I could shock you with this information. Like, I wish that I could just blow your mind by telling you this. But we've heard it so many times before, the shock just kind of wears off. But here it is. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Word, Jesus Christ, became flesh and dwelt among us. Right? He came here to us. Right? He took off his robe of authority. And he came here to serve us. And yeah, we can take that to its final point and say, yeah, he died a miserable, torturous death for us. He took on our sin. The God of perfection took on our sin. You know, but if we can understand the immensity with which we've been served, the gospel, then that's going to change the way we act. But understand, guys, is a relative term, and that's why I want to kind of get real with what I just said. It's a relative term. I've learned this being a youth pastor. You know, when you tell kids, do you understand the gospel? They're like, yeah, I could write a book on it right now. Are you a Christian? No. What? Well, I thought it's not like that. Understanding is a relative term. It's like it's something that you have to work on. It's more of a position of your heart. And so, as I've tried to recruit volunteers over the years, there's kind of a few different responses that I have come to typically respect. I mean, to begin with, there's some people who just understand the why. Okay, they understand the why. They say, I'm going in here to help these youth because when I was a teenager, nobody was there for me. Okay, Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins. I'm so utterly excited about what he did for me. I want to go pour into other people. They understand the why. Okay, but then there's other people who have to work to that point. And I think this is just human, so don't take offense to this, okay? Here's kind of a typical answers that we might get. First, you got the yes men. They say yes to everything, right? You're like, you want to volunteer for this? Yes. You want to volunteer for this? Yes. What about this? Yes, right? They have no forethought. They have no direction, and they have no idea where they're going. But they're going to say yes to everything. And before long, they get burnt out, right? Then you have the contemplators, and this one's me, all right? Contemplators, their worst fear in life is that they would waste their time. It's their worst fear in life, okay? So we spend all of our time thinking about how not to waste our time, which is ironic, right? Because we waste our time thinking. But we don't act. That's what we do. We think, we don't act. And then you have the squirrels. The squirrels, you ever been riding down the road and you see the squirrel in the middle of the road and you're like, please just move out of the way, you know. And the squirrel's like, no, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And you're like, just pick a side, you know. Just go somewhere, you know. And that's the squirrels. And they're like, they drive you crazy, you know. And then like before you know it, you hit them. And your wife's like, did you just hit that squirrel? And you're like, I'm pretty sure it was a stick, honey. It was a squirrel. You know, and then if you're Tommy Jinx, then your wife makes you go back, rescue the squirrel, put a cast on it, and next thing you know, Tommy's making his coffee, and hey, Fred, you know. Jody loves some animals. But yeah, here's the thing I want you to know, though. Wherever you fall in that category, maybe I hit you, maybe I didn't. Wherever you fall, when I present you with the opportunity of service, and you're saying, why? Whatever your process is to getting at this is what I know about you. If I were to just ask you, do you want to be a person who serves others? Almost everybody in this room would quickly and easily say, yes, absolutely. See, here's the thing. You've got a ton of really good intentions, right? But what stands between you is just a misunderstanding of the why. And as soon as you get that why down, you're going to know how to move forward. Right? You're going to know how to move forward. And I want to start off by the point of this whole talk so far has been to let you know that you may not know the why you serve right now. Okay? But you know what he did for you. Right? So when I present you, say, with an opportunity to be a youth leader or a children's worker or a greeter, right? When I present you with those opportunities, it's not to say that you know exactly what you're going to do in that position to really make a difference. But you can start from the point that you know what he did for you. Let the gospel be your guide, okay? Let the gospel be your guide, okay? Here's the thing I think maybe sort of is my pet peeve about service, and really about everything in the church, is that it's not about you all the time. Sometimes you being about others is what's about you, right? Part of serving others is about allowing Jesus to serve you, right? So if we read verse 8 and 9 there in chapter 13 again, it says, "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Right? Our vision statement of this church is that we exist to demonstrate God's love in action, and we do this by loving God completely, ourselves correctly, and others compassionately. God completely, ourselves correctly, others compassionately. Let me tell you something about Christians. Most churches are really good at explaining the God completely part and the others compassionately part. Some of them are good at others compassionately. All right? Those are the things that just make the most sense to us. Yeah, I'm supposed to love God and help others. It's easy. The part where it breaks down is the part where it comes to us, and we say, I have to love myself correctly, right? I have to love myself correctly. When you look at Peter here, guys, he says, you're not going to wash my feet. Jesus, I'm not going to let you serve me. I've got to serve you. I've got to go do all these other things. But then in the process, guys, you're leaving yourself out. Peter left himself out. And there's this great quote I ran across that I think sort of sums up what I'm trying to say here. He said, Jesus is more willing to meet us at the throne room of grace than we ever are to meet him. Jesus is more willing to meet us at the throne room of grace than we ever are to meet him. Like, that's a pretty crazy thought, right? That this whole time that you're searching for grace, like whatever it is, your guilt, your walls, your constant contemplation and lack of action, okay? Whatever it is, those things that bother you, that keep you from moving forward in what God's called you to do, right? When you lay all those things out, Jesus is more willing to provide you with grace to handle those things than you are to come to him. And this is what Peter did. He said, Jesus, I don't really want you to serve me. I'm okay to serve you, but I don't want you to serve me. And Jesus says, no, that's not how it works, because if you don't serve me, you can't be my servant. Or you don't let me serve you, you can't be my servant. Right? And this is something we need to get better at. I mean, I think of like children. One once you let Jesus serve you, you'll know how. Okay? Once you let Jesus serve you, you're going to know how. Right? I can't tell you enough how many times that I've tried to do service, that I've been in ministry, for instance, because this is my job, right? Serving is part of my job. It's so much a volunteer. I don't want to say it's a job because it's so much more than that. But it's my job. And I'm out serving, and I'm working with these kids, and you're serving, and you're serving, and you're serving. And sometimes you forget that inside part. Like, I didn't do my devotions, but I'm trying to preach a sermon. Or, I did my devotions, by the way. I didn't do my devotions, and I got to preach a sermon. Because pastors don't do their devotions sometimes too. Right? Or, I'm coming in this situation completely and utterly broken, and yet I'm trying to counsel someone else for their brokenness. I don't know, and here's the thing you come to at first. When you get into ministry, at first, you're like, I need to be better. I got to be better. Ministers don't do this. And then after you do it long enough, you realize we're human too, and the best I'm ever going to be is a little bit broken, okay? So you just get used to it, and after a while, you can kind of forget. And it's not just ministry, it's everybody. Like, that's what I learned. Another thing I learned being in ministry is that everybody's in ministry, right? I mean, if I resign as youth pastor at this church, I do not resign from ministry. Right? I mean, everybody's in ministry. And for that, if that's you guys, I want you to know that once you let Jesus serve you, then you're going to know how to serve others. And this is the place where we break down. This is Peter's mistake. Okay? Don't look at Jesus and say, I don't need you to serve me. I'm going to serve others. Because this is a lot of times what those yes men people will do. Yeah, man, I'll serve. I'll do this, I'll do that. And it's like, you done your devotions? No, I was too busy serving. All right? There's a balance, okay? And finally, guys, you serve because Jesus showed you how. Jesus showed you how, right? I love this, guys. Let's just read here, start in verse 12. I'm going to read through about 17 real quick. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. What place? The place of authority. Place of authority. When he took that outer garment off, he was a slave. When he put that slave's towel around his waist, he was a slave. And he got down and he served. And then he got up and he put back on his authority. He went back to his place, right? This is why Jesus, in the history of mankind, stands out as the oddest thing we've ever seen. The disciples didn't even understand it. When the disciples went to Jesus at one point told them, he said, look, I'm going to get mocked and beaten when we go to Jerusalem. And you know what their reply was? So, like, when you become king, can I be at your right and this dude at your left? I'm going to be mocked and beaten. Yeah, we're really sorry about that, but can I be at your right? Authority. I want authority. Give me authority, because authority's good. Authority's good. And Jesus is like, yeah, well, I'm going to wash your feet. And then when he got through washing his feet, he stood up and he put back on his clothes, put back on his authority. So do you understand what I have done for you? He looks at Peter and says, do you understand what I've done for you? He said, you call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. And now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. And I have set you an example. You should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master. No servant is greater than his master. Right? So if Jesus is going to wash Peter's feet, then by all means, Peter can wash another disciple's feet, right? And this is where we talk about service, and it's like, you're all in ministry, guys. You're all in ministry. And I would say to this point that the staff has this much to do with our success. Okay? You're the ones that have to do with our success. And it's weird sometimes because the staff always knows that, and you guys, I think, sometimes don't. I want to lift you up and let you know that you are our team. Okay? You are our team. The greatest coaches in the world don't win Super Bowls or NBA championships or World Series. The greatest coaches in the world don't win anything because they're not playing. The players win the games, and you're our team. You're our team. That's where it comes down. That's where it comes down here to you serve because Jesus showed you how, not because we showed you how. Okay? I might fail. I might fail. Sometimes I'm on my game, sometimes I'm not. I'm human, but man, here's what we have in common. We can always look up to Jesus and say, you know what? I can serve because I know what you've done for me. Okay? Because I know that part of serving others is allowing you to serve me. Because I'm broken too. But because of that, you serve because Jesus showed you how. He expects us to do the same. And then at the very end there, he says, now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. It's another incentive, guys. Why? Because it's good for you. It's good for you. I always ask the question, if you were given the opportunity to help a poor person, and you really did do an awesome thing, and you really helped them, do you ever feel bad about that? No. What about if you just totally gypped somebody? Like if you walk out of the grocery store, and you had that item in your cart you didn't see, and you're like, woohoo, got out free and clean, and you just go on home, Do you feel bad about that? Yeah. You always feel bad when you do bad, and you always feel good when you do good, right? And Jesus is telling you, if you will serve people, that's where you're going to find your blessing, all right? So to kind of close it up, I have this book I've been looking at recently called Leaders Eat Last. You guys ever heard of Leaders Eat Last? I think it's by a guy named Simon Sinek. He's a leadership guru dude, and he also is a Christian. And he went to study leadership, and he basically was like, going to all these different organizations and studying leadership. And he finally went to this one set of Marines, and he was hanging out with these Marine officers. And after they had talked about leadership and the Marines and things, finally they went to the mess hall, and they were going to have some lunch. And he said, so I'm hanging out with these officers, the only people I know, so I want to get in line with them. And I noticed that they're standing back and letting everybody else get in line in front of us. And I'm like, what's going on here? Why are all these people getting in line? And he said, in the Marines, leaders eat last. In the Marines, leaders eat last. And he said, what do you mean? He said, if you look at the line at the lunchroom in the Marines, you can tell the rank of the officer. Right? Because the lower the rank, the further you are to the front. And the leader literally eats last. General's at the back of the line. That's crazy. But I was thinking about that, man. And I was thinking about this idea of Jesus. Leaders have authority. Right? They have authority. And Jesus took off his authority. He went down. He did the work of a slave. And then he got up and put back on his authority. That's what a true leader does. That's what a true leader does. Right? He has the authority, but his authority is so filled with servanthood, right? And that was Jesus. That was Jesus. And guys, here's the thing I want to say to you. The bottom line of this whole sermon is this. You need to serve others because of what Jesus did for you, not because of any other reason, right? All the other reasons that we have are good. Some of them might be awesome, right? Hey, it's got to fit in your schedule, right? I mean, that's all great and fine and well. You got a priority list, and you got to fit Jesus in that priority list. But the whole point is, guys, you got to serve Jesus because of what he did for you guys. And this is the reason why this is really easy. And I want to leave you thinking about this. Jesus is the only person you will ever meet in your life. Okay, the only person who ever walked this earth who had that much authority and served in that great a way. That's a leader you can follow. That's a leader you can follow. You know why leaders eat last works? Because if it doesn't happen that way, then if we're all starving and we throw a pile of food in the middle of the room, who's going to eat? The big people, right? The strong people, the people with guns. That's who's going to eat. We're not going to follow anybody. There's not going to be any leader. But when a leader takes control of people and he says, listen, we're going to spread this out and I'm going to eat last, you can always trust that leader. Right? You can always trust that leader. And this is Jesus. He has more authority than any leader ever had, and he has served us in such a great way that no other leader could ever serve us that way. And you put those two things together, and you get the best thing in your life worth following. Nothing compares with it. All right? Nothing compares with it. So quickly, I just have one last question for you. What service opportunity is God telling you to look into? Okay? And I'm asking that question very specifically. What service opportunity is God telling you to look into? Okay, now, I don't know that this is a question you've asked. Now, I got to be honest with you. I'm preaching to you guys about service like you're not serving, okay? For sure, I mean, and Jason talks about this all the time, our like serving percentage is pretty high here at this church. Okay, it's pretty high. I mean, we're doing really good. So I'm pumping up the troops. I'm not telling you you're doing a bad job at all. But still, guys, I want you to think about this. What is God telling you to do? I know in my whole life, there's always been this thing that I'm like, if I could only, if I get enough time, those things, right? Fill in those blanks. What are those things for you? What are those things for you? Because if you can find out what that is, here's what I want to tell you. Think about what Jesus did for you. Make sure that you're loving yourself correctly, right? Because part of serving others is about allowing Jesus to serve you. And then look at what Jesus did. Jesus took off his authority to go down to the kids area and change diapers, right? He took off his authority to do what I did at camp and sleep in a room next to a bunch of middle school boys who stole all my clean towels. You know? Seriously, all of them. One of them gets out of the shower, I walk over there, he's got my towel around his waist. I'm like, dude! You gotta make sacrifices if you're going to serve, and that's just part of reality. I'm not trying to act like that's not the case. You're going to have to make sacrifices. What I'm telling you is they're worth it because you're following the leader who has more authority and made a greater sacrifice than you will ever have. You can always trust his leadership, and you can always follow him, and he's showing you this is the perfect example. It's me. This is the gospel. Go live in that gospel. Go share your life with others. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pray. If any of you guys I talked to earlier could come on up now. I got some volunteer coordinators that I just want to have come up here. They're going to be sitting in the front row. I thought these are our leaders, okay? And we got a few of them. If you're a volunteer coordinator, please come on up to it that I didn't ask. But we got a few different volunteer coordinators here, and these are people who really pour a lot of time and energy, and maybe they don't get thanked a lot, okay? But I want to thank all those people. And I want to give them the opportunity just to pray with you if you come up. I'll be up here too. Because they're doing work, guys, like Jesus did, right? They're taking off their authority and they're doing the hard work, right, that we need to move forward. So I just want to thank him for that. Let me go ahead and pray. God, our lives are filled with things to do, Lord, and sports and friendships, even relationships, boats, everything in the world, Lord, that we love and appreciate. Our lives are filled with these things, and God, I pray that in the midst of all the voices and all the things that are pushing themselves on us, that we would stop, Lord, and be able to know that we are loved by you. You're going to love us to the end, just like your disciples. We're loved by you, Lord, and that if we come to you and we let you serve us, that we'll have what it takes to go out and change the world. God, help us to pick our one, Lord, and do for that one what we wish we could do for everybody. God, help make us a church that not only preaches love in action, Lord, but lives it, Lord. Help us to not lose our passion. Help us to continue. In Jesus' name.